Right, the exam's obviously looming near, so I'm just throwing a few extra videos up to help people on any areas they might be struggling with, particularly on the Nazis. A question you might be asked is like how popular Hitler was, and I know I've covered that on some of the videos where he had, like, for example, the opposition in the children's and young people's video. But I'm just going to go a little bit further now, and look at a little bit into the 1940s in particular, with something called the Kreisau Circle, Kreisau, and basically this is a group who opposed Hitler, opposed the Nazi Party from basically when he came to power. A lot of this criticism's building up. They basically meet in an estate called in Kreisau, and basically it's owned by a man which you might remember the name of, Helmut von Moltke. It's one of his relations, like a descendant of the von Moltke family, which were obviously very well to do. And basically, as I've said, the Nazis didn't have total support in Germany. They had a lot of support for people who went along with them because of what they provided and what they showed they provided via their propaganda, from like how bad Germany had been since the Depression. But there was people who rebelled, and then there was people who kept their heads down via fear. And basically you've got to ask the question, if the Nazi Party were that well loved, would you really need the concentration camps, the Gestapo, the censorship of the media, the education system which was there to create Nazis? No. And what you've got is that Hitler did have problems with the German army. He did face a lot of questions there. So you could say, like, if you look back to the night of the long knives, how he went to great pains to make sure they stayed on side there. He knew the army could have removed him, and he did have problems with some of the richer aristocratic families in Germany at that time. And this is where this circle comes in. They believed that Hitler and the Nazis would be an absolute disaster, a disgrace for Germany. They didn't like the attacks on the churches and Christianity, and they wanted this humanitarian Germany to re-emerge. And this would mean they had to get rid of Hitler and they had to get rid of the Nazi Party. So you did see basically that Hitler was facing opposition massively from the Kreisau Circle, and obviously what they were doing was, treason essentially at this time in Germany. We believe there were 20 members of the circle, but when you look at their backgrounds, it ranged from people who had army connections, military connections, to people who were just academics, intelligent, people who were Catholic, people who were Protestant, people who were socialist, people who were conservative. So there wasn't like one group here. It was across. They represented like a cross section of society, and basically they've got their ties into the July 1944 bomb plot. And there were members of the Kreisau Circle who were killed prior to this. So von Moltke was killed, was arrested in the beginning of 1944 and was executed on treason after being put in front of the Nazis' People's Court, where he had like next to no chance. But they did have their connections to the bomb plot, and basically the July bomb plot was an attempt to kill Hitler, and it was the one that was the most famous. It was made famous in the Valkyrie film with Tom Cruise, which I did recommend that people watched, just to give them an idea of what was going on at this time. And it was just, like, there were attempts to kill Nazis. So you could see, like, for example, Reinhard Heydrich, who was Hitler's hangman in Prague. He was successfully killed in 1942. So killing leading Nazis was not something that just wasn't going to happen, and there were attempts on Hitler's life. So by 1944, Germany's not as successful as it had been, and there's people in the military are basically seeing that Germany's doomed to defeat. It's going to happen. They've lost heavily at Stalingrad, and they were looking to open negotiations with Britain, etc., USA, to try and get an end to the war, because obviously they held these views about the Nazis for a long time from the Circle. And what you've basically got is Hitler knew, after there'd been attempts on the likes of Heydrich and Goebbels, that he had to take steps to make sure he wasn't killed. So no one knew where he was going in advance. It became like Hitler would just arrive somewhere. As the war started, he basically didn't leave some of his key positions. So places like the Berchtesgaden, his chancellery in Berlin, his Wolfslair, etc. in Prussia, the places that Hitler just basically didn't really leave unless he had to. And he would have had heightened security at all times, and you weren't allowed to carry a weapon around Hitler. So if you were going to get to Hitler, you really were going to have to think it through and have to have someone on the inside. And this is where the July plot really does have its perks, I suppose, because Count Klaus von Stauffenberg, who Tom Cruise played in the film, was someone who would, due to his position in the German army, have frequent contact and could come and go from the Wolf's Lair pretty much without question. Basically, he was highly ranked in the military. He had been severely wounded, so he basically was without one of his arms, like forearm and hand, and he also only had 3 fingers on the other hand. He wears an eye patch in the film Tom Cruise. That's because he'd lost an eye. And basically he was promoted into this position where he would be meeting regularly with Hitler, and him being around Hitler in the Wolf's Lair would be absolutely nothing that would arouse suspicion or question at all, because that's what his job was. And the pressure was on really to get rid of Hitler, and with Stauffenberg he had the ability to plant the bombs that people wanted. There had been like numerous discussions within the Kreisau Circle, etc., of how to kill Hitler. So one of them was basically you had a young army officer offered to blow himself up in November of 1943 whilst modelling a new military coat in front of Hitler, a new uniform. He was just going to blow himself up and take Hitler with him. And this meeting was cancelled, so he didn't get a chance to do it. So Stauffenberg is basically appointed chief of staff, and basically what's going to happen is he's going to try and he becomes involved in this Valkyrie plot. It was with a man called Kreisau, and basically he has to go back to the Eastern Front, which is obviously the Russian side. So the decision is made that Hitler's going to be killed, and they're going to bring in a former general called Beck as the head of state once they've removed the Nazis and Hitler from their positions. Stauffenberg then is promoted into the position of colonel, and he's going to be attending meetings with Hitler. What happens is you get D-Day comes around. Germany now, it's pretty obvious that they've got no chance, and they've decided they're going to have to kill Hitler. And what basically happens is that Stauffenberg gets word that there's going to be this meeting on the 20th of July at 1 o'clock, and it was brought forward to 12:30, but it didn't really matter because he's got this case, basically this briefcase, and what's going to happen is the briefcase has got a detonator and a bomb in there, and they've got this broken capsule of acid, and it's basically burns through the wire and it activates the bomb. And Stauffenberg goes into the room, places the bomb basically right next to where Hitler's going to be thought to be standing, where he's analysing these maps. And then Stauffenberg says he's got to take a phone call from Berlin, and he gets out of there. And basically Stauffenberg gets away, and he gets out of the Wolf's Lair, and he goes to flee to Berlin. He hears the explosion and thinks that Hitler's dead, but in reality the case was moved, and Hitler basically just gets his clothes burnt a little bit, a cut on his hand, and damages his eardrums, and he's so, you know, like it's so little damage done to Adolf Hitler that a few hours later he's showing Mussolini round in the map room where the bombs got off, and Mussolini and him and Hitler's bragging about how he's going to find the people who tried to kill him, and basically the word gets out that there's been an attempt on Hitler's life, and basically Hitler is alive. It's put out there to Germany, and everybody who was in the war office is rounded up, and they're killed by firing squads. So Stauffenberg is shot, he's executed. Kreisau, they've traced that he was involved in it, and he's forced to march into like a basically no man's land on the Eastern Front, where he's killed by the Russians. And it is said that anyone who was involved in the plot would face torture, would face execution, and would face trial in front of Roland Freisler, who was basically the favoured Nazi judge, because he was absolutely merciless. So the plot failed, but if you look at the plot and the circle that was connected to it, it shows you that there were concerns about Hitler from the beginning. He never really had the full military on side, particularly as the war goes on, when Germany's starting to lose. It's particularly with Stalingrad and D-Day. It shows you with the Kreisau Circle makeup that it was the 20 people who were thought to be involved were all sections of society, so it wasn't just one group. Hitler was not liked by everyone, and the army and the aristocracy in particular were looking for ways to get rid of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, particularly as World War II went on and it became apparent that Germany was losing. So I hope that helps out a little bit, just in case you get asked about it. Thanks for watching.